A few years back, I was working for a company who will remain nameless. I would put so many hours in an attempt to climb the career ladder. And all of these hours would be unpaid, of course. I would use my lunch breaks to catch up on sleep. It became routine for me to pull into a quiet area, eat lunch, read a bit, then go to sleep. In the evenings, I would always visit clients, and that meant that from lunchtime till early evening, my bosses assumed I was traveling. It was a little dishonest to sleep on the job, but I was so tired from working overtime and my company was ignoring the labor standards law. I never managed to sleep deeply in the car, so I guess that was why sleep paralysis soon found me. I remember it was a cold day in December when it happened. I was en route to visit a client and I found a great area to pull into to take a nap. I found a vacant plot of land by a dam, a blind spot from the highway, behind some bushes. I ate, reclined the seat, and read. Before I knew it, I was asleep. When I opened my eyes, the LCD display screen in my car displayed a track and the time. It was 6:05, and I think Radiohead were playing. I remember thinking, "Oh, you idiot, you overslept." I went to put my chair back in position, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. My body felt heavy, and the atmosphere in the car was dark. My eyes were fixed on the windscreen. I could see something dark in the upper right-hand side of the windscreen. It was a shadow of a human hand. The time changed on the LCD display to 6:06 p.m. It hurt my eyes for some reason. I looked back to where the hand was, and now a shadowy head was peering down at me. I couldn't make out any facial features. It was just a black silhouette with one hand resting on the middle of the windshield. It was staring at me. Even though I couldn't see its eyes, I knew it was staring at me, observing me like a fish in a fish tank. While it was staring at me, I felt intense feelings of anger and unbearable waves of sadness. I had heard stories about people sensing these feelings when in proximity to the paranormal, but I had never believed in it. It's like you could sense someone's final emotions. It's unexplainable. I couldn't move. I was just face to face with this dark shadow. I was asking myself if I was sleeping or not. I was trying to figure out what that shadow was. A lot was happening. All the while, the shadow was just staring at me without any form of slight movement. I had the ability to move my eyes, but suddenly, I was unable to. All the surrounding colors in the car and outside of the windows faded away. I couldn't see my book anymore, and the LCD clock disappeared. I was slipping into darkness. It was terrifying. Then I heard something against my window. My fear was now at its peak. I still couldn't move, and now something was trying to get in or at least make its presence known. Then I realized that it was a knocking sound. Hearing it louder the second time, suddenly I was freed from the binds of sleep paralysis. It was bright out. I looked at the clock. It was only 2:30. Nowhere near 6:05 I saw earlier. I heard the knocking again. It wasn't part of the nightmare that I had just been through. I looked out of the window and saw two shadows. The sunlight was obscuring their faces. I put my window down and shielded my eyes. Two police officers were stood at the driver's side window. One looked about 30 and the other looked about 50. They announced themselves. I was disorientated and a bit on edge, so perhaps I was rude to them. I think I said something like, "What's the problem?" "What are you doing here?" the older officer replied. "I was just taking a nap, but what's wrong? Am I on private land or something? I don't mean to trespass." "No, that's not the problem. As you know, we're in a recession at the moment. You come here to this, place and you're alone. We were just making sure that you weren't going to do anything stupid." I asked the younger officer what he was implying, and the older one responded, "Sir, have you come here to take your life?" I told him, honestly, that I just pulled over because I've been so tired at work lately and I wasn't going to do anything stupid. I apologized for giving them that impression. I could have never been ready for his response. "Sir, with the greatest of respect, we saw what you were doing in the car. You were strangling yourself, to the point where your eyes rolled back. Are you sure that nothing is wrong?" I was completely floored by that statement. After a while, I managed to convince them that I was going to be okay. I told them that I would get some rest and take care of myself and they wouldn't have to worry about me coming back here again. I got out of there as fast as I could and headed back to the office. I called the client and asked them if they were okay with having a phone consultation, and they were. I didn't want to be alone. I left that area by the dam, feeling truly terrified. Since that day, I didn't want to take naps in my car again. Every time I would feel tired, I would just remember that shadow and what the officers said I had been doing in my car. I slipped into a light form of depression due to the lack of sleep. I was stressed and it was affecting my work. I was one of the bottom performers at work. Within a month of seeing that shadow on my windshield, I left my job and no one complained or cared. I think I was saving myself from being fired, to be honest. I don't know what that shadow was, but recently I'm not so sure that it was paranormal. I just think I had a scary dream brought on by my tiredness and the status of my mental health at the time. Well, for better or for worse, it got me to leave my company and prioritize my health. I am a bit frightened that the shadow will come back one day if I enter another period of unhappiness in my life. My physical and mental condition wasn't good, and I think that's why sleep paralysis came for me that day. Please, take care of yourselves if you can relate to this.
This happened when I was in elementary school. Back then, I was experiencing a lot of paranormal goings-on. I believed that I had the ability to see and hear spirits, and I never thought that anyone would believe me, so I kept it all to myself. I didn't want anyone to laugh at me or make me speak to a psychiatrist or anything. Then one night, I was sleeping as usual, but I woke up due to a severe pain in my back. It was as if I was lying on stakes, sharp, pointy sticks. I went to turn to see if I was lying on something, but I couldn't move. I tried as hard as I could, but I just couldn't move a muscle. It was sleep paralysis. I had never experienced anything like this before. I was sweating profusely, and I had never been this frightened in my life. Something primal inside me knew that there was something very wrong about the situation. I was trying to move my hand to wipe the sweat off my forehead so it wouldn't go in my eyes, but I couldn't move my hand. I struggled against this unseen power which had a hold of me, and one of my fingertips moved slightly. I knew that my grandma was in the next room. The light from her room was on, and I could see it spilling into my room. I tried calling out to her, but I couldn't scream or even speak. I kept screaming in my head for help, but I couldn't make a sound. I tried moving my fingers again, but I couldn't feel anything beneath them. Incredibly, I was being raised above my bed. I was praying it was a dream at this point. It didn't seem like a dream, and it was too terrifying. The ceiling was coming straight at me. I felt a terrible chill deep within my body. I thought that I was seriously about to die. All around me, I could hear evil, horrible-sounding whispers, and I had no idea about what the voices were saying, but they sounded so dark and hateful. The pain beneath my back has increased, and it felt like the number of stakes had risen. I felt something touching my hair. I knew that whatever was touching my hair would soon be grabbing my neck. I just kept thinking that I was about to die, and Grandma next door won't even realize when it happens. Suddenly, the force beneath my back was less strong. Gradually, the direction of my body changed. I wanted this to be a dream so badly, but I knew that it wasn't. Years later, I would understand that a child of my age at that time would have found it near impossible to create such horror, and I knew so little about fear at that age. I thought that I might have repackaged the memory of some horrible incident from my childhood, but I remember it all so clearly. It was real. My body had now completed a full 180-degree rotation in the air, and I was now facing the opposite direction and started moving towards the wall. I remember thinking that something's going to drag me into the wall, and those horrible whispers had become a chorus of chants. I tried to move any part of my body, but all I could move were my fingers. And I really wanted someone to come walking into my room and stop all of this. The tip of my toe touched the wall without making a sound. But then I heard a dog barking really loud, like it was warning off an enemy or an intruder. The moment I heard the dog bark, I was slammed back into the mattress. My grandma finally comes rushing in asking about what all the noise was. I was lying there in a stunned silence. I knew those barks I heard, and they sounded just like my dog's bark. Sadly, he died a few years ago. I have seemed to have lost the ability to sense spirits in my older age. But I'd love to hear my dog again one day. I can't wait to see him again when it's time. And buddy, thank you for protecting me.
Do you ever talk to yourself? Did you know that it's an ancient spirit communication game? It was described as a form of necromancy long ago. In order to participate, you need 2 chairs, one chair for you and one for the spirit. It is said that if you start speaking, then it gives the spirit an invitation to enter your room. I did something very similar inadvertently, and I sensed the presence of the paranormal. I want to share my experience. Back then I was working as a nutritionalist at a hospital. I would be on the first train of the morning, and I wouldn't come home until it was dark out, even in the summer. I was working some crazy hours. I guess I must have wanted to make an impression at work. It was really tiring. I never wanted to take a day off from work either. On reflection, the lack of rest days was causing me stress. On the rare days I would have off work, I would just sleep and try to recover. If I wasn't remembering giving young patients unwanted gastro cameras, then having pangs of guilt, that is. Due to this lack of social interaction, the number of friends who kept in contact with me after I cancelled plans so many times dwindled. I found that most of my time was spent with myself and my bed. So, this was how it started. I got into bed one night and I just started talking to myself. It sounds mad, right? But let me add some context. The first thing I said was, "Okay, I'll be up and ready to go to work at 4 in the morning and then I'll do it all over again." From that day forward, I'd come home and speak to myself when I was in bed. This went on for some time. I couldn't put a number on the days. One night I was in that eerie place between sleep and consciousness, dozing, and then I sensed something. I felt that something was next to me in the bed. I felt something's weight shift next to me. I instantly opened my eyes to make sure, but no one was there. When I shut my eyes, I had the disturbing feeling that someone was watching me. It was like they were peering down at me in the dark. I couldn't sleep on my back from then on. I had to sleep with my chin tucked against my chest. The unease around sleep lasted for about a month. It wasn't that much of an issue, as I could always get to sleep, so I didn't let it disturb me that much. I guess I was too tired to do anything about it anyway. Then one night, things changed for me, in a big way. I guess I must have fallen asleep on my back. Maybe I was overtired or sick that day. Whatever the reason was, I slipped into sleep paralysis that night. Both of my wrists were grasped by some unseen force. I was completely restrained. I couldn't move at all. All of my doors and windows were locked, so I could quickly rule out a home invasion, right? I had no evidence that someone was in my apartment either. I experienced the exact same thing a few times a month. I mean, sleep paralysis or whatever was going on. I cannot think of another explanation. Or maybe all of this was brought on by stress, or some spirit attached to me at the hospital and followed me home. Or maybe I was careless and forgot to lock the door a few times, but none of my possessions were ever missing. Or maybe I invited something in by beginning talking to myself in that empty apartment. It's really weird. I don't know. I'll update if something happens. There have been no further updates.
Recently, I experienced sleep paralysis for the first time, and I'm 28 years old. By the way, before I get into my experience, I just want to say that I have never been the type of person capable of sensing the presence of spirits or the paranormal. However, that's all changed in the last couple of weeks because one night recently, I awoke in the dead of the night and my body couldn't move. I thought for a moment that I was still asleep, but I knew that I wasn't. Knowing that I was awake, yet unable to move was so strange, and I was feeling tense because, in a way, I have always been waiting for this opportunity. When you think about sleep paralysis, it really is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, right? I always wanted to know what it was like. I tried to move using all of my power, and I only managed to move a minuscule amount. It felt like my body was stuck to the bed, and my chest felt tight and painful too. Next, I tried to speak or make any kind of sound, but all I could manage was a dull moan. I was amazed by experiencing it. And you might think that I'm weird here, but to be honest, I was kind of enjoying it. But one thing was missing, the most important thing. There was no spirit in sight. I really thought that this was my chance to see something paranormal. Since it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I tried to move my eyes to see around the room, and I could only really see the bedside table and the edge of the bed. The scariest thing in that room was the alarm clock, and that was always there. There was no creepy old lady in a rocking chair, smiling or laughing, no pale woman in a kimono looming over me, and no demon in the corner of the room glaring at me either. Oh, I thought that maybe something is going to come crawling towards my bed, but nothing did. Then I thought that something might creep around my open door. Nothing. I strained my eyes to look around again, but nothing was in the room with me. My chest was still in pain, and I guessed about 10 minutes had passed, and I was still stuck to the mattress, unable to move. I have had enough of it. I put all of my effort into moving and shouting, and then surprisingly, I emerged victorious. I was released from my sleep paralysis. I stumbled into the kitchen, grabbed a beer, and then headed into the living room. After draining the can, I headed back to bed again, and I went back to sleep without issue. I woke up when the alarm clock went off and reluctantly stepped into the bathroom to get ready for another working day. I got ready to wash my face and froze when I caught eyes with myself in the mirror. I had 3 bruises on my face. They were all on the right-hand side of my face. There were scratches around my throat and some on my left cheek. I have no idea what happened that night, and I couldn't understand how these marks were on my face. Nothing was in my room. Nothing that I could see anyway.
This happened when I was staying on an island with my friend. The weather was perfect on the day we arrived on Ishigaki Island. I stood there in front of the ocean, breathing in the sea air and thinking, this is just what I needed. The sea was a gorgeous shade of deep blue. It's such a beautiful place. I booked a room in a hotel which faced the sea. It wasn't an expensive hotel and the room was quite small. I didn't mind though, since I wouldn't be there all that much. I would be out and about, enjoying the trip. My friend and I planned on going scuba diving in the morning. I always tried to avoid Japanese-style rooms, you know, the inns, with the hanging scrolls on the wall and the creepy screen doors and such. Those places are so old, I swear that when you lie on your back and you look up at the ceiling, you can see faces emerging from the patterns in the wood. Anyway, for whatever reason, I avoid any hotels like that, and go for the more modern ones. Let me just say, you don't want to tangle with any places which give off creepy vibes down in Okinawa. Just go for the food and relax by the sea. That was my plan anyway. I had dinner in a great restaurant and headed back to my room pretty tipsy. I managed to get all the stuff I needed to be ready the next day. I unpacked all my bags, and with the room now in order, I was ready to hit the hay. I lay in bed waiting for inevitable unconsciousness, but all I could focus on was the sound of the waves outside of my window. The way they were crashing sounded as if someone was out there, murmuring. I told myself that the waves outside were the very same ones which had relaxed me in the daylight, but now seemed frightening with the lights out. It didn't make sense. I didn't like it on the island now that the sun had set, and now that unseen things could be imagined. I told myself to fall asleep as quickly as I could, but then, before I knew it, sleep paralysis. It hadn't happened to me before, so I was confused, but then, in that half-dream state between consciousness and sleep, I realized that I was no longer in control of my own body. My mind was clear, free from the beers of that night in fact, yet my body refused to move. When I tried to call out to my friend who I was sharing the room with, I found that I couldn't make a sound. This sleep paralysis state continued, and then a new sensation occurred. I felt the temperature of my body drop, internally and externally. Then my mind stupidly reminded me of a strange statement I had heard before. When you feel a change in temperature, spirits are close by. If nothing else, I had control of my own vision, thankfully. I scanned the room and I couldn't see anything out of place. No ghosts. My eyes desperately scanned each corner of the room, and then my ears were alerted to the sound of someone forcing open my window. The curtain by the window started fluttering. I was terrified. I was trying to think of rational excuses as to why the curtain would be suddenly moving. Perhaps I left the air conditioner on, although I knew that I was lying to myself. The waves and that murmuring sound were rising and tormenting me. They were so loud, I struggled in bed, but I couldn't move an inch. I thought that if I saw something, some figure, some object of horror, I would completely lose my mind. The terror was building to a heart-stopping level. I managed to close my eyes, and even though they were shut, I looked away from the window. Then, suddenly, I could move my body. I was relieved, but still scared. I decided to wake my friend up. I needed someone to speak to. I was embarrassingly about to ask him to sleep in my bed, but thankfully I didn't. We spoke for a while, and then I heard something hit the window, in very quick successions, like fingers drumming on a desk. It sent shivers up my spine. It sounded as if it was huge raindrops or something, but of course, it wasn't raining out. It would make this sound every now and then, and my friend and I decided that we were not prepared to stay in that hotel room that night. We got up, got dressed, and headed outside and walked around until the morning. When it was light, we headed back to the hotel to look around for any possible cause of the sound that we heard, but we couldn't find anything. I even went online to try and find out if any other guests had experienced anything similar, but I couldn't find anything. I don't know if I can class that as a paranormal experience, but all I can say is that we weren't alone that night. Something was there with us, and I'm glad we got out when we did.